Hello, hello, hello. Kevin Epps here, Digital Brilliance Hour with another tutorial. All right, so we're moving on. We created our animated screen model. We're actually going to take that model, put it in the game in the title screen and on the menu screen. One change that I actually decided to go with in regards to that. So in the last lesson, we took the front sprite of the title screen with the characters and the text. So we took that sprite and made its own model out of it. But we're actually not going to use that model. We're going to load the sprite itself onto the screen. So we're going to layer it on top of the model that we're putting in the background. But right now I have Sublime Text and OpenBORStats open. Really only have stats open to actually play the game once we finish our coding. The two files that I have open are located in data scripts, update.c and updated.c. And these should signify the fact that the language in this file is built in C. All right. So we're actually going to start with update.c. And if you want more information on what these files do and why they're named in this way, remember to check the manual to find out those things. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So here first, we need to make sure that we have the sprite of the title screen. Remember the front sprite. We need to make sure that these are loaded into memory to then be shown on the screen when we're ready. So I'm actually on the lesson itself, I actually have the code here. So you can actually just copy and paste from the code, but we're going to discuss what this code does so you know what you're copying and pasting. No, don't just copy and paste and then just run and just think, oh, okay, good, it works. No, that's not how you do this. You need to understand what you're doing, right? You need to get the relationship between everything. So if you need to apply this to a different situation, you know what to do because you understand what you're doing and you're applying it to a new situation that comes up. All right, earlier in the intro to advanced scripting, we talked about the three different entity types. So we have this variable here, which is a void data type. So we have two variables because there's no parentheses here. You are then loading these variables because you have the equal sign, and with the output of a function called load sprite, which takes in a parameter that points to where the sprite is actually located in your file base. Then the second parameter, title2, is also doing the same thing, equal sign, taking in the function that returns the sprite after taking in a parameter of the location of the file itself, which is black.gif and data bgs black.gif. So these two parameters are now storing information at this point. Here, set global var. So there's a difference between a variable being declared in a local file or in a local function versus a variable being declared across the whole game itself. So again, make sure to check the manual to see what these do. Load sprite is in the manual, set global var is in the manual, so make sure to check what those do. But this basically creates a variable that can then be pulled in from the global sense. So it's global. So from anywhere in the game, you can pull in this variable called title1 because we kept the name the same. So title1, set global variable is the function, obviously, with two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the variable that you want to use. And then title1 is the variable that you've stored information in. So title1 is the name of the global variable, and you're storing this global variable with this local variable information. And you're doing the same thing for title2. So you're loading the variables in two different ways, but at the end of the day, these are still variables, and these are still variables. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this now that we know that what we're doing. Remember that we have 3 base functions in a file that you can use. You have your main script, you have your onCreate, and your onDestroy. So in your onCreate function, we're going to paste that code underneath this set indexed var bit. So I already copied. Now I'm about to paste in. One quick tip that you can do. Notice how this code is kind of out of whack. We want to make sure the code is readable, and in order to do that, we need to make sure that this text is tabbed over to where this is, so it all looks clean and readable, and you know what's inside what. So a quick way to do that is actually to highlight all the text that isn't tabbed over. So you can highlight it and then just click tab to move it all at the same time. So I'm gonna click tab once, then click tab one more time, and it moves it over, moves everything over. If you ever needed to go backwards, have a backwards tab, you just hold shift and hit tab, and that'll let you go backward as well. But we're gonna move it back to where it is right now. So again, the onCreate, this is like your create area. So as the game is starting, you can actually create and load up different sprites and different objects at the start of the game. Because we have many different ways to show different things. You know, we have the models, we have the spawns. This is another way that you can load things. You can layer different things this way, but again, use the manual to learn more about this. But so yeah, so on the create, this is where we're inputting this information, and so this is going to run this as the engine loads the game. Okay, so now that that's there, we need to look at the onDestroy, because when we load in this information, it stays in the memory. And in typical practice and for optimization purposes, we need to also make sure when we're not running the game, we need to make sure we get rid of what's in the memory from the game, because we don't want leftover memory being stored on your computer, and then all of a sudden your computer's running slow because of a game you've been playing. So that's where the onDestroy comes in, where now in this function we're taking in we're creating 2 variables where we are now getting the global variable that we created here in onCreate. So we're getting that global variable called title1 and title2, and then storing that information into this local variable that's in the onDestroy function. I hope that all makes sense. So this title1, title2 is getting the global variables called title1 and title2 and storing that in itself. All right. Here you have the free. Free just means get rid of, destroy, remove it from the memory. So free, let it go, let it go. You're holding it hostage. Now let it go. So you would apply free to both of these variables. So this would just make everything null and get it out of the memory space. And then inside of the actual global variable, we're just setting everything to null. So we're setting set global variable title1 and title2, which are these 2. So we're taking those global variables and just setting it to null, just to make sure that nothing is bleeding over into your computer. Your game only loads what it needs to for the game and gets rid of it when you close it, and it'll load it again when you run the game. So it only loads it when you need it. So that's what these do. So just cleaning up everything. So we're going to onDestroy. We're going to go ahead and paste that inside, and remember, we need to clean this code up to make sure it's readable, make sure we know that it's actually inside of this function. So we are highlighting this code and hitting tab, and now it's clean and the way it's supposed to be. All right, that's all we need for this particular portion. So we're going to be using these two sprites that have been stored into this global variable, and you'll be seeing that soon. So let's go ahead and save this. And the next file we need to change is updated.c. So we actually have it open. This is what you'll currently see right now. This is what's already in there. And we're gonna have to make some changes here. And again, I'm gonna explain everything that we do. Don't just copy and paste and show, but look at what you're doing. All right. Okay. So in the first place, we're gonna start above line 13 and copy and paste these two in. All right. So there is a background, a variable, two backgrounds. We got background 1 and background 2. We use this variable, this global variable, to change the actual background of any scene that we might want to add an animated model to. So right now we're only applying this to the title screen and menu screen, but what if we wanted to apply this to the character select screen? What if we wanted to apply this to the Hall of Fame screen? What about the game over? What about the stage completed? So there are many different screens that you can apply an animated model to. State levels will be different because you can actually spawn that model inside the stage and use it that way. So you wouldn't necessarily need to apply it there. This is for those other types of screens that don't have the ability to spawn models inside of it. So that's what these two do. So it's checking to see if there is a global variable called background and background 2, and if it is, it's storing that into background and background 2 variables, local variables. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this in, and we say above line 13. Here's line 13, so it means above. So we're just gonna press enter to move the line down, and we're going to paste it in and clean up the code. All right, so everything's readable. So those are those two lines. So now we're really going to start getting into the meat here. Again, we are focusing on the title screen and the menu screen. All right, so when it comes to loading things, and when it comes to game development runs on a loop. Like you can't move anything unless the game is running on a loop to make sure that it moves each time. So if you just say, hey, I want this object to move like 1 pixel at every cycle, there needs to be a cycle, a loop that happens to ensure that if you're pressing left or right, it's going to move in that direction of whatever arrow you press. So because the game is in a constant loop, you have to make sure that you only load things that you want loaded one time, that you only load it one time. Spawn already does that for you out the box, but for this kind of advanced technique to load in an animated screen for your title area, you have to do this yourself, because the title area really only takes in like a GIF background file or a PNG file. So it loads the PNG file in it by default, and you don't have to worry about the loop and all of that, because it's going to load at one time and all that. But because you're circumventing what's done by default, you need to also do your own logic to make sure that you're behaving in the same way. I hope that all that makes sense. All right, so you have the local variable called title counter and title M counter, and again, it's doing the same thing as this. This code up here is taking the get local variable called title counter and also title M counter. If those are available, it's going to store that information into these two local variables. Right underneath is checking to see what's happening. So it's checking title counters, checking this variable in this conditional. It's an if conditional, It's checking this variable to see if it's not equal to 0, to the number 0. If it isn't, if it's null or 1, it's going to set this local variable, because there's a set local variable function as well. So it's going to select, it's going to set this variable that is more like a globally local variable. So you can basically, all this means is that you can share variable information between functions on a file. So if you declared, for instance, if you had background declared in one function, and then you wrote another function called background, and you tried to refer to the background variable that's in the first function, you wouldn't be able to do that. But if you use set local variable and created a variable that way, you would be able to get that local variable from this global queue, basically. I hope that makes sense. When you see it in practice, you'll get what I mean. Okay, so like I said, we're checking the title counter. If it's not 0, we'll make sure that we set it to 0. And if title M counter is not 0, we make sure that we set that to 0. And again, these are the local variable, the globally local variables. So we'll go ahead and put that underneath in level loop. So if we look at the code here, we see if sys in level, and this basically all this means is if you are running a level. So if you're in a stage, do this. So if you're in the level, if the system is in a level or running a level file, then run this in level loop. That's what it's telling you to do. And I'm just gonna, this is being pasted in here simply because, let me go ahead and clean this up. Simply because we don't want the title information and the animated model to be loaded when you're trying to load the level. So we don't want that. And so we're telling the counter to reset itself to 0, because we're going to see why we're using this counter in a second. All right. So now that that's done, we need to also comment out these two lines here. So lines after pasting in lines 27 and 40, which is else if system scene is not equal to intro. We don't need this right now. And to comment out, we see this option to comment out where it's using the / and star and forward /. But in this case, we only want to comment out 2 single lines. In the OpenBOR script, we would use pound to do that. But in C, we can use / So that's how you comment out stuff in C. So / and then 40 / So now this is commented out. So this will be hidden from the compiler. And we're actually going to copy all of this. Let's go ahead and copy and paste all this, and then I'm going to explain everything inside of the file itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to paste this under this bracket, which is at line 26. So paste that in, and again, we need to clean the code because it's a lot. So let's go ahead and select lines 95 all the way up to 28. So everything that you pasted in that's under syscene equals intro.txt, just gonna tab it over, make sure everything's clean, so everything is in its same spot like it's supposed to be. All right, so remember, we're talking about conditionals now. So this is an overall conditional. So you first have the if statement. If you're in the level, run this. Also, if you're system scene, if you're in a system scene and it's equal to the intro, run that. Right now that's empty. Also, if your system scene is the logo, run this. So you have if, and then else if, and then another if. So these are, again, checking these conditionals. If you're in those scenes in the game, you know, run code that's inside of there. Right now it's empty, which is fine. We'll need it later. Okay, now the moment you've been waiting for, let's talk about the end title and then menu. So you have your title screen, and you also have your menu screen after, you know, because your title screen is where it says press start. And then after you press start, you see your menu options. That's your menu screen. All right. So if you are in the title screen, that's what 32 is saying. It's telling you to take the M counter. This is actually standing for your music counter. So you're taking in, you're creating a variable for this conditional. You're creating this variable. Here's the equal sign. You're taking in the information from the get local variable, which is the globally local variable, which is called title M counter. Remember, that is set up here. Title M counter. You're grabbing that information, and while the title M counter is not equal to 1, right now it will be entered as 0. It will be either 0 or null. And so if it's not equal to 1, you're going to see this in the next lesson. But there's a function that allows you to play the music that we created, but you'll see that soon. That's commented out for now. In line 36, you take this music counter and set it to 1, so that way when you get to this title screen, you only play this one time. So this will break that loop, because while the TM count title M counter is not 1, it's not equal to 1, go ahead and set it to 1. That will then break out of this loop. This is a loop. So the while and do, that's saying while this isn't equal to 1, if I didn't set this to 1, this will keep going until you set it to 1. Hopefully that makes sense. The system in menu, same thing. In the menu screen, you're taking the title, title M counter, the music counter. If the M counter is not 0, because in this case it's probably going to be 1 from the title screen, set it to 0. So that's how you're able to, when you go off the title screen, you're then going back to see, you're going to a different screen, and that different screen is going to set that globally local variable to 0. So when you go back to the title screen, you can rerun it again. It's just your way of making sure if you run a command, it doesn't run over and over and over and over and over, because this game is based on a loop. So if you just say, hey, just play the music without putting these measures in place, the game is just going to attempt to play the music over and over and over and over and over. So you want to put measures in place to make sure it doesn't do that. All right. So now we're looking at, we haven't seen this operator before. This operator is OR. So if you are in the menu screen or the title screen, so if you're in either one of these screens, we are going to load in the title counter, which is that globally local variable. So title counter, and while the title counter is not equal to 1, we're going to run this loop. So this is a whole loop here. This whole loop. So we're going to run everything inside, and this will keep running until title counter is equal to 1. Okay. So we're creating a variable here. We have another variable with the data type of int. That's a number. So the iValid is taking in and checking the entity property of background, if it exists. We're checking to see if it even exists. If it doesn't exist, it's just going to keep on going. If it does, because if it exists, then iValid is going to be true or 1. So this is a conditional to see if iValid is true. That's why you don't see any operators. When it's by itself, it's just saying, is this true? So if iValid exists, then kill it. We don't need it right now. So we're going to kill it if it exists. Kill entity. That means just remove it from the memory, because we're going to apply it again. All right. So now we're getting into the loading of the model. So remember, we created a model called title animation. So now we need to load that model, because just in case we only did the no method instead of the load method, either way, it's going to load the model for you, load it in memory so it can be ready to spawn inside of this area. So we're loading that model. We're clearing the spawn entry, because when you spawn something, the spawns get entered into a queue. And so once you enter the spawn into the queue and then you spawn it, you need to empty out the queue to make sure there isn't anything left over from the different spawns that happen. So that's why you're clearing the spawn entry. Now we're setting up the spawn entry. The spawn entry is the queue. You're setting up the queued spawn to then spawn later. Hopefully that makes sense. But we have these two functions that are running in 58 and 59. So we're setting up the queue here. Set spawn entry name. So the entry or the model, which is because the model is what you're spawning. So we're setting up the name, or the name of the next spawn that you're going to spawn, the queue, to be the title animation, because we had to make sure it's loaded up first. Then we can go ahead and load in the entry or the queue with this name, with this model. And then we are setting the coordinates. This is again using those same coordinates to center. You're actually centering the background. So the chords, you're centering the background, 313, 152, and we're using -1000 as the Z. This is your Z axis. Remember, that's the back and front. So this is making sure that it stays in the background. So -1000. All right. So you're seeing the same kind of information that you see when you are building an OpenBORStats. So now that we've set this information on this spawn queue, on this entry that's inside the spawn queue, we then actually spawn it. So we take that. So this is happening. So let me also say, when you are spawning entries in a level, this is actually what's happening behind the scenes. So that command that you use when you spawn and then you put chords and then all of that is this is being ran when you do that in the level file. You're just doing this manually because you're not in the level file that does this for you. So this is why you have to understand what you're doing and what's happening. So if you have to do this again, you know how to apply and you know what to do. So yeah. So now you took what's inside of the spawn queue and then spawned it inside of the subint variable, which you declared up here. This is a variable. So now you're storing the spawn from the queue inside of the subint. So at this point, this is now spawned. This is now when it actually becomes visible in the screen. Then you set the global variable to background. So you take this variable that you spawned, the spawn model that you stored in this variable, and store it into the background global variable. So that's how you were able to pull in to see if any of this is even available or not. because if this does exist, if this already loaded, you want to kill it. You don't want it there. All right. So at this point, you want to change the entity variable. Again, the manual talks about all of these functions here. So if you want to learn more about what these functions do, check out the manual. But change entity property, it now takes this entity that you spawned out and you can change its position to 313. And I actually moved this down 50 pixels because this is where I wanted it positioned. But if you want to play around and see how the position looks, you can do that. And then I also set this to -1000. Again, it's just like the Z. This is the Z axis. So X, Y, and Z. And then we're setting that title. Remember that title counter? We're setting that variable, or that globally local variable, to 1. So then that will break this loop, because again, you're going to run this while title counter is not equal to 1. So that's why you turn on this variable, to make sure to turn this off. And so if you were in one of these screens, do all of this. If not, that's what else is. So else is any other option that doesn't match either if or else if. So that's your basically default. So if you don't match this conditional, then run this. This is the default. So else, if you're not in these screens, then you go ahead and set title counter, set the globally local title counter to 0. So when you come back to this screen, title counter would be 0. Then it's going to run this again. So you have to put in the logic to make sure that the code is doing what you want when you want it. But you also want to be optimized enough to ensure that you're not storing so much and using so much memory that you break the game and your computer, because you use so much memory. So that's what optimization is. You want to change the speed and make sure the speed is very efficient and the memory is efficient. Now we're going to load in those 2 sprites. Remember, we in update.c we had these 2 sprites that we loaded into the global variables and set the global variables. So now we're going to take those global variables. So in system title, on the title screen, we want to load in title 1. And remember, title 1 is that sprite with the text and the characters inside. That's what title 1 is. So we're going to get the global variable that was set, add on create, pull that into this local variable, which is title 1. And we're also going to create another variable called main title. We're going to store in title 1 into main title. And now we're going to draw the sprite. So we're going to draw the sprite now. So draw sprite is what actually draws the sprite onto the screen. So that's what it does. Again, if you see something you are unaware of, I'll quickly go over it, but make sure to use the manual. But so now we're drawing this sprite at 0, 0, because remember, the sprite is the same size as the screen. And so the top left of the sprite, you're going to set at 0, 0, so it fits over the screen. And then the Z axis, instead of -1000, we're going to do -2. -2 makes sure that it's behind any of the text that might appear on the screen, like press start and the menu. So we want to make sure it appears behind that, but at the same time still appears above the background. So that's why this has a higher Z value than the actual background. And then we are going to change the alpha to 0. So there's a reason why we're doing this. So change draw method. You can change the draw method, the draw style of what you load in the screen. You can either change the draw style of a model, which is what we're doing here, or you can do the same for actual loaded sprites. And you can load many sprites on the screen. They can kind of be labor intensive if you get too many, but like you wanted to do something special on, you know, a cutscene file, and you wanted to load some sprites and move them around and stuff like that, you can actually do that. So this is the manual way of going about that without using a model or an object. So you have the sprite, and the reason why you're setting this to null, you're changing the draw style of all the sprites on the screen. There's not a way to target an actual sprite in your draw method. So the only way to target the sprites is to just do an all apply. So this is null. So this isn't pointing to an object. So it's taking all the sprites that are loaded, not including the model is any of the models or objects on the screen, just the sprites. So we're taking that, setting the alpha to 0. Alpha just means the draw style. 0 just means the normal default way of displaying a sprite. So there are no filters on it, nothing. So it's just regular way. All right. So that's the end title. All right. And now when you're in the menu screen, what I wanted to do is load in this black screen that's here. There should be a black screen. Yeah, I believe you have the screen. I'll make sure to include this inside of the lesson if it's not there. If you don't have it in your space, just download it and make sure to paste it or copy and paste it into your data BGS folder. All right. So taking the black PNG or the GIF. So now we're taking that sprite in the menu. So in the menu, we're loading both title 1, title 2. Title 2 is the black. So you have main title and black mask. So main title is equal to 1. I have these two commented out for a reason, and we'll go into it in a later depth. Main title is equal to title 1. Black mask is equal to title 2. Remember, title 1 has a z-axis of -2. Right, and so we want to see the words, and we want to apply a dark hue to the screen so you can see the words in front of it. So this black mask or this sprite is going to be drawn on the screen at 0, 0, and also we're going to set the z-axis to -1, which will mean it'll be in front of both the title sprite and the background model. And then we're setting the alpha of all the sprites on the screen, because again, you can't target sprites, which is why I hid this. We're changing this to mode 6. And again, if you want to look at change draw methods and alphas and the different filters you can apply, make sure to check out the manual. But mode 6 just basically means the 50% opacity. So it allows it to be see-through basically. So that's all we did on both of these. So now that we have this going, let's go ahead and save this as well. And we're going to run the game. So let's load this up. We're going to go ahead and run it. All right. So let's go ahead and get this going. So we're passing all these screens. Now we're in the title screen. So now you can see the train in the background. You can see the sprite in the foreground, right? So you see both of those, and I'm just going to let it sit here. You can also see press start as well. So everything is behind the press start text. So then when it goes back, you know, it runs all the code to make sure it saves everything and resets everything. So when you go back to the screen, everything is working like it should. So then if I press start and go to the menu screen, see now I hid the actual, I hid the title sprite, but added the dark hue. So that's the black screen and made it 50% opacity so I could see through it. Then this also helps you see the text above it as well. So this is how it all works. This is how it all works. So now, hopefully, I know this is very long because we really went into the code. Hopefully this is helpful to you. In the next video, we're actually going to fix the title screen issue, because as you probably have noticed, when you go on the title screen, all of a sudden it goes silent. So we need to go ahead and make sure to add music. So we already saw in the code that we commented out the function that's related to actually playing the music. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. So hopefully, again, this is very informative and you learned a lot. You're probably going to have to go back over the video several times, but that's what learning engineering and game development is all about. Software development. You're not just going to learn in one go. You might have to rewatch it a few times. You might have to go over it a few times. It might have to play around a few times until it sinks in, and figure out the best way that it sinks in for you. All right. But anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all stay blessed and stay brilliant. Peace. We hope you're learning what you can from these free tutorials. Again, if you feel you need more in-depth or extensive services or extra help with learning and getting the most out of this and don't want to wait on the videos, please feel free to join our DBH community for only $5. That doesn't mean you can't ask questions on here though. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to post those. Like and share this playlist for those who may need it. At the end of the day, we just want to help people build their engineering and coding skills to be efficient wherever they want to go. I'm Kevin. Appreciate you watching and be brilliant. Peace.